So if you say immersion, of course, you'll say presence. And presence is really this more subjective experience of feeling and behaving as if you're in a virtual world. So it's subjective, meaning that two people can have the exact same virtual reality experience. They're shown exactly the same environment, the same experience, but their subjective experience of it is completely different. So perhaps one person really feels present in that virtual world, but the other person experiencing exactly the same things doesn't feel present in that virtual world. So it's subjective. Very different, of course, from this objective measure of immersion that we saw before. There's even an international society for presence research, and they define presence as a psychological state, so a mental state, a subjective state, in which even though part or all of an individual's current experience is generated by technology, part or all of the individual's perception fails to acknowledge that. It fails to acknowledge the role of technology in the experience, meaning that for a certain amount of time, you sort of accept this digital world, of which in the back of your head, you know it's not real. You accept for a certain amount of time that it is actually real. You treat it as if it is real. So this is often related to this concept of suspension of disbelief. You suspend the disbelief that you have that this virtual world that surrounds you is unreal. You're willing to accept that it's real and you will behave as if it is real. Different types of presence. First of all, there's spatial presence, the illusion of being in this different place, spatially. You feel as if you're in this different world. This you could phrase also more shortly as being there. You're in this different place, you're being there. There's also social presence. So in those virtual worlds, you can encounter other people. And social presence really is a subjective experience of closeness and connectedness with others in mediated communication. So here also, this is a subjective experience. Some people in the same virtual world might feel very close and very connected to other people they encounter in this virtual world. Other people might not believe that those virtual agents or avatars that they encounter in this virtual world are real. They might not have this subjective experience of closeness or connectedness. So this you could more shortly phrase as being with others in the same virtual surroundings. Is this convincing to you or not? Finally, co-presence. This is the ability to even touch others in this virtual world and or jointly manipulate the shared space and the shared objects that you encounter in this virtual world. So this is, for instance, very relevant for business meetings. So if you're working in a company that has different, that is working in different places in the world, and you want to have a virtual meeting all together and work on things together, it can be very nice to all wear a virtual reality headset, go into the same virtual surroundings and jointly manipulate things in that environment. This can be phrased as being there with. You're in a certain place with others where you can jointly do things together. Right. How do you actually measure presence? So presence is often measured in master thesis projects, for instance. You can subjectively measure it. So you can have a certain person have a certain experience, for instance, in a virtual world, and then afterwards have them fill out a questionnaire with questions like the questions you see here. For instance, there are statements like, I felt myself being drawn in on a scale from 1 to 5. I lost track of time. The displaced environment seemed natural. All those things contribute to the subjective experience that people have, how present they felt in this other world. You can, of course, also more objectively measure this by looking at people's behaviors. Do people start behaving in the virtual world in the way that they would usually behave? So if they're, for instance, in a virtual elevator that goes up very quickly to the top floor of a building, and they leave the elevator, and all of a sudden when they look down, they experience that they're on this very high building looking down. It might be kind of scary. If they start behaving in the way that they would normally behave, you can conclude from that they feel very present in this virtual world. So how equivalent is their behavior compared to their real world behavior usually? Another example is walking on a wooden bridge. This is often a demo with the VR headsets. You get this headset on your head and you're asked to walk across a wooden bridge that doesn't look very reliable from one rock to the other, very high above the ground. If people behave as they would in normal circumstances, that might mean that they feel very present in this virtual world. Another objective measure are so-called physiological measures. For instance, you can measure people's heart rate. Does their heartbeat go up when something scary happens? This might mean that they indeed feel very convinced, they feel very present in this virtual environment. Yeah, do they replicate a real world fear response? Does their heartbeat go up in this virtual environment if something happens in the way it would go up in the actual world? Well, what are then factors influencing presence? Actually, this is, I think, nicely where immersion and presence come together. Immersion actually predicts presence. So those technological factors, those objective factors, influence the subjective sense of presence. So for instance, if your VR system has very good tracking capabilities, the sense of presence that people will have will be higher because everything looks more convincing. If there's a larger field of view, if they can see more of the virtual world, the sense of presence will go up. If the quality of what they see and what they hear is higher, of course, also the chances that their sense of presence is higher also goes up. So in this way, immersion can predict presence. They're closely related. If you briefly said, if your system is better in terms of its objective technological capabilities, the chances are higher that people will feel more present in the virtual environment that they see.